Hello there, welcome to FFS Livestream, and a very sad day because this is the very final FFS Livestream that you're going to get in your face this year. We'll do another separate video thanking all of the people we need to thank, but this is just the final one, and I have two people with me. Who better to carry out the ultimate post-mortem of the 2018 Fringe than Amy Taylor from The Skinny.
Hello.
Theatre editor.
Yes, that's right.
And Richard Stamp from Fringe Guru.
Hello.
Theatre editor, editor. So, here we are. We all made it. We're all fine.
Here. Yes, yes.
What's been your highlight this year?
Oh gosh.
It's an impossible question. People always ask this,
Yeah.
but you can't choose just one. Shall I go first to give you a chance to think about it? So I have two highlights, I think. One because it was really quite unexpected, which was a show called 147 Hertz Can't Pass at Greenside. The title tells you almost nothing about it, but it was about gender identity, but about somebody who neither identifies as a man or a woman. So I think we're all getting quite comfortable now with the idea of somebody of transgender men, transgender women, but this was something different which we haven't experienced on stage before. I haven't experienced on stage before. So that's going to stay with me for quite a long time, I think. And then the second one is the kind of show which just defines the Fringe for me, called After Today at PQA. I think they're on tomorrow, so there is still a chance to catch this one, which was a really quirky story about the notorious interview with the Sex Pistols.
I like that. PQA?
Yeah, notorious interview with the Sex Pistols by a guy called Bill Grundy. This was literally in the year that I was born. It's still embedded in my cultural knowledge.
Welcome back, one of our regular guests, the flyer.
Yeah, so a fun story to choose, a really small-scale production, 2 actors on the stage, a nice witty script, a little bit of a point to it at the end, and that to me is just the perfect Fringe show.
Great. Very succinct. I had a weird Fringe in that I got Fringe flu after seeing only 4 shows. So I've seen shows at the beginning and then a couple of shows at the end. But Underground Railroad Game at the Traverse was, I've never seen anything like it. The same with Home, that was at EIF. Never seen anything like it, never see anything like it again. They were just so exceptional in the way they used the form, and Home especially, and how they got the audience involved. And usually I hate audience participation, but that was fantastic. But then there were like smaller shows like Chris Davis's Drunk Lion, which is at the Free Fringe. He's a fantastic storyteller. I always make a point of trying to see him every Fringe. So it's been a real mixed bag for me, and seeing huge shows and seeing like really little ones as well.
And obviously you're both theatre focused. Have you seen any comedy? There's quite a bit of that about, I think.
There is.
I haven't seen much this year. I've normally been really good about going across all the genres, not to review because I can't, but just to experience the Fringe. But it's been such a busy one this year. I've not had as much of a chance to do that. I did see a show called Don Juan yesterday, which was probably in the theatre section. I think it's probably in the theatre section, but it's definitely a comedy end, and that was my opportunity to let myself.
There were a lot of shows that kind of, if there was a theatre/comedy section, I think they should have been in there. Because the things like Ostentatious is comedy, but I would argue it's also theatre as well. So I think we should. Because it's so rigid, sometimes it's really hard to make that leap into comedy, because I'm like, I'd have to go through the comedy editor Ben and say, do you have plans to review this? Is it okay if I go review this? So yeah, I think if we just amalgamate the two a little bit more, it might be easier.
I mean, there is a lot of cross-pollination of that anyway. How many silent discos have you done? That's the face that I've seen a lot.
If I could get Flamethrower and just chase them through the streets like Ripley, I would, because it's the fact they're so eerie, and the fact that they just materialise. It's like whenever you're in a rush, they were suddenly there. It was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something. They were just there dancing, and you can't get round them, and you can't get through them, and they're waving their arms about, and they're half dressed. I hate it.
It's an interesting thing.
I'm such a party pooper, but I fucking hate it.
The first time I saw one, I was like, oh wow, that's really cool, and how amazing. And then the practicalities of it start to pop in. I've seen a lot of complaints about people saying, it's great until they stop outside your venue that has a very thin window blocking it off from the street.
It just terrifies me on a very practical level of they're going down roads or going down streets. I'm like, for a logistical way for them to herd cats, essentially cats wearing headphones, and get them out of danger, it terrifies me because I think there will be an accident, and because you know what Edinburgh's like during the Fringe, so I think it's a lovely idea. But in practice, it didn't work for me, and it made me feel very uncomfortable.
I think there's a general agreement that there needs to be some sort of regulation of it.
Yes, a dancing zone they can be in, like.
It might be a metaphor for the Fringe as a whole, I think.
Yeah.
Because I mean, 2 or 3 years ago when it first happened, it was fun, but it was a lot smaller. And it wasn't so intrusive into just your daily life, trying to get around Edinburgh. And now it's become this huge commercial proposition. And yeah, it is a menace, and the council ought to do something to stop it. Sorry everybody, but that is what I think.
It's
Is
just
it the council, or is it the?
materialise.
I mean,
It must be licensed somehow, sure.
are street performers subject to the same sort of?
That I don't know.
No, well, that's something. Yeah, we should probably look into before discussing it at
But
length.
Mile so regulated with their spaces and how they're collecting their money, and then they have this kind of wandering band of feral dancers going around Edinburgh. Like, I would really be interested to know how that's arranged. I mean, I know I sound awful in such a Grinch or whatever, but it's just, if you're trying to get from venue A to venue B and you have 5 minutes and there's people wearing headphones dancing around you and you literally can't go through them or around them, it's very frustrating.
Those sort of bespoke pop-up events, they're really like, it's like, oh, we love those at the festival,
Yeah.
but then at the same time, needs a bit of.
Yes, it needs
Special shout out to the guys who are doing the spooky open top bus tour around the city that's called Ghost Bus Tours,
Yes.
which I didn't get for at least the first half of the Fringe, and then suddenly went, oh yeah, I see what they've done. Review-wise, this year I have a theory that 4 is the new 5. There's been very few shows that have been like standout, big splash successes. I think if you look around the poster boards, there's a load of 4-star. 4-star seems to be like, that's the best we got.
I'm not sure it's 4 is the new 5. I think it is genuinely just that there haven't been those big shows that have really coalesced opinion around them. I have a theory that the Fringe alternates, that one year there's a lot of returning work that's been successful the year before it's coming back, and then the next year there's a lot of new work, and it oscillates around. And this has felt like a year for new work rather than one where there are big nailed-on successes.
I mean, Lynn wrote that piece about Lynn Gardner in the stage about how there hadn't been a big 5-star show this year, and I kind of agreed with her. There were shows I went, that was exceptional, like Underground Railroad Game, but a lot of it I found myself, and my writers, a lot of 4 stars, not as many 3s. So that was quite interesting as well. Was there a hit with the Fringe, do you think? I don't know. Sometimes I think it gets a bit too much, like, we must list this, it has to be the best this, the best that, and sometimes there just isn't, because everything's good.
Yeah.
And I actually feel quite positively about the fact that there isn't just
Yeah.
one show that everybody's talking about. Because we have given out quite a lot of 5s this year, because to be honest with you, we're getting a bit better at choosing the shows that are likely to succeed. But they've been small shows in small venues, like Proxy at Gilded Balloon, for example, is a wonderful, wonderful show. There's just one person in the smallest space at the turret, and that's got a 5 from me. So it's nice that there is space for that kind of work to emerge and breathe.
Is it maybe indicative of the fact that the Fringe is becoming bigger, the quantity of shows is more, so that there's just, maybe I'm just noticing more 4-star reviews because there are just more shows?
I think the difficulty we face is that the Fringe is getting bigger, which, it's how you look at growth is like, is it getting bigger, is that a good thing, or maybe it needs to kind of grow inwardly? I don't know. But in terms of publicity, there are fewer national publications covering it. There are a lot of local ones like us, and that's great, but then it's a case of we're not getting paid enough to cover it, we don't have enough time. So people come to the Fringe, I think, with massive expectations of press that I don't think the press in its current state can fulfill. Maybe once we figure out what the hell we're doing with paywalls and stuff, it might get better, and people are willing to pay for a newspaper and stuff again, it might get better. But we're facing that battle, that it's getting bigger. How can we cover this in the best possible way? But we're not going to cover everything.
Should we get rid of should we get rid of stars from reviews?
My favourite subject. People say all the time that we should, particularly Fringe Guru should, and it would kind of suit our ethos, but there are a few reasons. I mean, one is that we publish hundreds of reviews, and if you seriously think that a member of the public is going to read through all of those reviews just to get an answer to the question, what do we recommend, then you're deluding yourself. Another reason is a more behind-the-scenes one, that sometimes when I'm doing the editing job, I find that the star rating doesn't quite match the copy of the review. And normally when that's happened, the problem is that the star rating is correct, as in it correctly reflects the reviewer's opinion. but they've just put the wrong emphasis into the copy. So just to keep us honest, I think the star rating is really helpful. And we did have a conversation about whether we should have like a secret star rating that we didn't publish, but then we wouldn't take it seriously, and it all wouldn't work.
The thing about star ratings is everybody says they hate them until they get a 5-star review,
Yeah.
and then
absolutely.
it all over everything.
Everybody
and you're
uses
like,
them.
Everybody uses them. So I think it's a case of, as an industry, we have to turn around and go, we're not doing this anymore. But nobody is. There's a few places like don't use stars, or then they even brought in 7 stars just to fuck with us and get some publicity. I don't know. So I think there needs to be a universal consensus on them. Right now they're here, and I do agree with sometimes you will get a review and it's 3 stars, and you're like, this reads more like a 4, or you get a 4 that reads more like a 3, or you get the Act saying, well, you said all these lovely things, but then you gave us a 3. Like a 3-star review isn't bad.
Yeah,
You
I mean,
really
this is
have
something.
to look at the content of the review rather than just the star rating.
So there's the interesting thing that Fringe Review did maybe 5 years ago now, which was to dispense with the star ratings and use sort of word descriptions instead.
Highly recommended
Highly
show.
recommended.
Yeah, that's a
And-
5-star.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not highly recommended. If we were going to draw an analogue, which we shouldn't, but if we were going to draw an analogue, then highly recommended is more a 4, and they've got an outstanding rating, which is the
right,
top
that's
one.
right,
And on the one hand, did that really achieve anything? Because here we are having this conversation and mapping them back to stars. But I think what it did successfully do was to break the perception that a 3-star review is a bad review. So something that would previously have got 3 stars under their old system started to get recommended, which much better represents what they mean by that. So perhaps there's some mileage in that. We thought sometimes about having like separate star ratings for script and performance or something like that. But at the end of the day, any new system that you conjure up has a whole new set of flaws,
Yeah.
and at least
And people need time to get used to it, and people still don't quite get the star rating as we have now.
Yeah.
I did have somebody ask for a re-review. They got a 3-star review, and the way it was written, it was great. They said the performer was excellent and were really complimentary of them, but I think the performer went, I don't want a 3-star review. And they didn't want to say that. They came back like, oh, well, there was technical issues, and it's like, but you still let the reviewer in, and you knew this review was coming, and you had a few days to say, no, please, can you come back? It was only once it was published they went, oh, actually, yeah, that's not how it works.
it's a really hard situation to
It
deal
is,
with.
yeah.
When something's gone wrong, which is not the performer's fault,
Yeah.
knowing what to do about that is probably one of the hardest calls that I have to make.
Yeah. And the thing is, with the writer, they said the performer was very good at dealing with the technical issues. But then this performer in their email, they said, we've actually rewritten the show as well. So this review now doesn't reflect the show as it is now. And you're like, that's not, I'm like, in another few days, you're going to come out and go, we've rewritten it again. Can we get another review? It's just not going to work like that.
Did it score the same the second time round?
No, we never reviewed it the second time.
Okay.
Only the first time, because
Okay.
they'd had their review, and I felt like the written part, it was good. I think they wanted a 5-star.
And if we see a show again, then that's
Yes,
some
and
show
then
that's
that's
not
you-
going to get
Another show's not going to
at
get a
all.
review, and
Yeah.
and they wanted a different writer to review it, and I felt we sent the best writer to review that show.
Does the star system maybe infantilize it a little bit and make it so that criticism is less important? Should we, I mean, if we got rid of, there's an argument that says if we got rid of that, then people would read it properly, whereas sometimes they just skim it and go, right, that was a
People
5-star.
would still take like a 3-word pull quote and stick it on their posters,
Yeah.
wouldn't they? I don't object. I don't mind when I just see star ratings on posters because there are 2 separate audiences, 2 separate things we're doing. I mean, we are providing star ratings and pull quotes to go on posters. That is absolutely part of what we're doing.
Right.
But another part of it is providing the proper long form reviews for people who want to read it, which might be the public or it might be other industry people.
I mean, even the long form reviews generally have a paragraph, a sort of opening or closing paragraph that is basically the short version that you could potentially use. Like you in the Fringe brochure, you get your 50-word version and then your 250 extended blurb. So this year, for the first time, I think, on the Ed Fringe website, there's the reviews section, and by default this year, I think for the first time, it defaults to the audience reviews rather than the publication. So what's your value here? What value does the brand of your publication
I think audience
bring?
reviews are really good. Like Gilded Balloon especially, they've got really behind audience reviews. Like, they are the people that pay the money. They have to, it's good to go see a show and then shout about it. And I have seen the benefit it has, particularly for performers. If, maybe they've not had a great day, and then they've looked at their listing on edfringe.com, and then they've had a really lovely review from someone saying, oh, I just want to say thank you so much, this was a great show. And that is because, a lot of the public might not have done that and gone up to the performer after the show because it's a bit intimidating, or the performer's doing the get out or whatever. So they've definitely got their place. In terms of professional reviews, it's really like, people will go to a publication or a writer because they value that publication or that writer and their opinion, the way they write. So somewhere, it just depends on what you're looking for from a review, really. So somewhere like Exeunt is much more long form, very artistic. A lot of, theatre types really like that. The average consumer might grab something like The Skinny or Fringe Guru or The List or The Scotsman or whatever. So it really depends what you want from a review.
And there's just so many of them now.
There's so many, yes.
There's sort of blogs
You
popping up all the time.
find your trusted voice and you stick with it. That's what I find.
Right. Do you have one?
Me.
There we go.
I think that audience reviews have really taken off this Fringe. The problem always was that because not many got posted, you couldn't really trust them because they were probably just the performers' friends putting stuff up.
Thanks, Mum. 5 stars.
Do they not verify and say this person bought tickets through at fringe.com?
I'm not
used to,
sure.
there used to be something.
Used to. I don't know, but it's a problem for free shows, of course, or when the ticket's been bought through the venue. But now, there are more of them, and you're starting to see bad ones, not just good ones. And I personally trust them more than I did before. So it might happen. I mean, there might be changing of the guard, and there might be no need for us anymore. But we're certainly not there yet. And as I've already alluded to, there are different audiences, and once the Fringe is over, and people want to have proof of what they've done to take forward, put in front of other theatres or in front of funding bodies. Audience reviews obviously are not valueless there, but they don't really quite cut it. Whereas something from a known professional publication is what people are really looking for there.
It's just another version of word of mouth.
Yeah. I've seen people using audience reviews this year, I think for the first time on their flyers, in the absence of any professional reviews.
I've had people send me their audience reviews, say, we've had some great audience reviews, and I'm like, that's really cool, great, good for you.
I mean, you're quite right. Like we discovered we had a sort of an average review in the middle, and we were feeling a bit down about it. And it was a couple of days later we actually went onto the Ed Fringe page and found that we'd got like 5 or 6 lovely audience reviews, and there are no 3 stars there. That's a 1 star or a 5 star. That's the only reason anyone will leave you a review. I've seen some people tweeting their 1 star audience reviews saying, oh, "This guy can't come again. Don't want him again." A lot of people talking about the working conditions at the Fringe this year, particularly with regards to venue staff, because performers boo-hoo, but the venue staff. How do we fix this? How big a problem is it?
I think it's always been a problem. We've only just started to talk about it, and I think the way to fix it is to talk about it. Campaigns like the Fair Fringe and things like that can only draw attention to it and get us talking about it. Because before you'd think, everyone here is getting paid the minimum wage or the living wage or whatever, and then you hear they're getting paid, £200, and they're sleeping in a room with, 5 other people, and it's tough conditions. And before, when the Fringe was smaller, that might have worked. Now, living conditions are harder, everything's more expensive. I think especially the big venues need to pull their finger out and protect their staff. I was talking to somebody who works for Assembly a few days ago, and she'd been physically assaulted by a member of the audience in Assembly Hall because they didn't like their seats. He actually pushed her several times, and the whole kind of feeling around it, they did get whisked away to better seats for bad behaviour, which is wrong, and I really think the manager should chuck that fucker out.
Yeah, you wouldn't do it on an aeroplane.
Because he did it in front of his family, The kind of consensus you got initially was, well, it's a Fringe, these things kind of happen. And it's like, no, that's not good enough. That it's never been good enough, and it's certainly not good enough now. And they now are having better conversations on how to deal with it. But then it's like you need to bring security in and stuff. And it was like Summer Hall had security and stuff. But I really think we need to be more honest with the situations we're in and say, hey, this is tough, how can we make this better, what's available, go to the Fringe, say what can we do about it.
And is that the job of the Fringe Society, do you think?
I think the Fringe Society need to have a say. I think we can't have one society being like, you do this, you do this. Maybe I talk about guidelines of how we can better support the venues. Why can't the venues support their staff better? What's going on within the venue, what's going on within that company? Because when you know it's a company that makes a lot of money and they're paying their staff literally nothing, just cause they're working at this venue and it's a status symbol, that's not good enough. I'm sorry, it's not fucking good enough.
Do we know how much these companies are making?
No, but I'd love to find out. Company's House, let's go. Let's see. It'd be a nice investigative piece, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, we know, for example, that Pleasance is a charity.
Yes, it is. That's the thing.
And to be absolutely clear, I don't think there's been any criticism made specifically about the Pleasance in this whole dialogue. And in general, I don't think that the people who run the venues take away as much money as people believe they do. Possibly with one or two exceptions. There's one very commercial venue chain, which I guess we both have in our heads at the moment. But in general, I don't think that there is massive profit being pushed away, and we do that. That needs to form a part of the discussion, because if we're saying that everybody involved, let's say we said that everybody involved in Fringe Guru, my company, had to be paid, we would have to close. We can't afford to do it. Now the difference is that my reviewers are genuine volunteers, so they don't have to work when they don't want to, and they can do as much as they want to. They can work for other people at the same time, and I genuinely don't think you'll find anybody who writes for us or writes for the Skinny or who will complain about the deal that they get. But I'm just using that as an example to say that it can be more complicated than it seems.
Yeah.
Nobody wants their registration fees to go up. Everybody wants more support from the venues. It's clear, it's become clear, and I salute the people who have exposed this. It's become clear that the balance is wrong, but there is a balance to be struck.
Yeah, because the flip side of this argument is, we're living in what is now a service-driven, gig-based economy where, certainly some of the venues would argue, we're offering an apprenticeship, we're offering like an opportunity you can't get anywhere else to experience this, and people are agreeing to those terms in their contracts. Obviously, there's been some examples of people saying that those agreements have not been kind of held up.
And of course they get venue passes, which is a huge benefit, provided you have the opportunity to use them. So I think one of the biggest criticisms that's been made against certain venues is that they were working people so hard that they didn't have the chance to actually see anything at the Fringe, and that's the saddest thing. But I mean, again, I have friends who work at some of the big four, who are happy, really happy with the deal they've got, and a big factor for them is the opportunity to see shows for free as long as they're not sold out, and enjoy the Edinburgh Fringe that way. Yeah,
and some people will have on their CV at the end of the Fringe, they will have on their CV, I worked as a venue technician or a venue manager for a however high-profile venue at the Edinburgh Fringe. That's something that's on their CV forever.
I worked for a venue in the press office a few years ago, and we were paid minimum wage. And for some reason, I think you have to look at how they're paying their staff. So I still don't know why this was, but we were told we were going to work for 2 weeks, then we'd get pay, and then we'd work for another 2 weeks and get pay. Each time those 2 pays, they were late. And we only found out on the day we were meant to be paid that we were going to be late. And it was just a case of the people who were higher up didn't quite realise that these people were living paycheck to paycheck. So I think there needs to be a bit of reality check in some venues with some people, and go, you need to understand, just because you have money doesn't mean everybody working for you has money, and you need to pay people on time. And living wage, not minimum wage.
Yeah, and laws do apply up here.
And laws do apply, yes.
There's a lot of cash in hand work going on. Companies need to take the responsibility as well. So if you hire a flyerer, you have the responsibility to make sure that they get paid properly. If you're going direct to a flyerer, and that you're keeping adequate records of everything that's going, and that they're keeping the same records. It can't be the Wild West.
No, and that's the thing, is with the Fringe getting so big, I worry that these are the kind of problems that are just going to get bigger, 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 because they're getting overlooked, or people will go, well, that's how it's always been, and that's how I got to where I was, where I am now, and I had to do it, and I didn't complain. And it's like, but times have changed, and if you get to the top, your duty is not to pull the ladder up after you, it's to reach down and help people get up there too.
Yeah, lefty nonsense.
I know, what a cunt.
I mean, it's a wider societal problem, isn't it? It's Uber, and there's lots of companies. Is it worse here than it is out there in the real world?
What's the real world, Richard? I can't remember.
It winks out of existence for the month of August.
Yeah.
It'll be back again in September. I don't know. I absolutely do not know.
It's tough all round. Because I suddenly realised in the middle of August, I was like, oh, I need to put the September issue together now. Oh my God. And then it was like reality started setting in of, once this is all over, the bubbles burst, and I have to go back to hustling and freelancing and doing everything I do. So it is hard, especially in the creative industries.
Because all these buildings are just dismantled in a couple of days, aren't they? They just take all these buildings down.
All of it gone. It's like fog descends and it rises and it's all gone.
It's all fields again.
Yeah.
the biggest scandal, obviously, just a cheeky aside, the biggest scandal of the festival is the poutine van in Bristow Square attempting to serve cheddar instead of curds, and that's not poutine, that's chips and gravy and cheddar. I'm sorry, guys. So lots of things for the Fringe Society to be looking into, but I think we can put that top of the list. Is it too big now? This conversation comes up every year. Is the festival too big, or is it self-sustaining?
Well, it started as a fringe festival for the international festival, so obviously over the years it's grown. But it's like I said earlier, we have to look at how we look at growth. Like, is growth getting bigger, or is growth looking at the work we're doing, looking at how we're paying people, like reflecting, learning from past mistakes, or is it just getting bigger and bigger and bigger? Because the Fringe is massive and it's overpriced, and it's getting more and more difficult for people to come up here, or even people who are already here, to perform here. So I think we have to look at growth and how we can, again, make things a bit better and learn from what we've done before.
There's an argument that says this conversation happens every year, and the next year it is bigger and it doesn't fall apart and everything's fine.
The death of the Fringe has been predicted every single year since I started coming here in 1996. I do think there's a squeezed middle. I think that is something that we ought to be talking about. So I still see student companies coming up and bringing their university productions, and they go to the Spaces or a venue like that, and I see as many of those as I ever did. And then at the high end, there are companies that are making successes out of the Fringe, putting on very big productions. Not necessarily sort of commercial successes, but there are some big producers who are putting up creative works from London. But then in the middle, there's a group that I think is falling away, who are using Edinburgh as a showcase to get bookings or to set up rural tours, something like that, perhaps solo or two-handed productions. You'd see a lot of those good professional work at the Assembly or the Pleasance, and I think that group is starting to get squeezed out from both directions, and that's a real shame. And maybe the solution will just be that they go somewhere else. I mean, there's no reason why we all have to come to Edinburgh to have a big trade show. So there could be another one somewhere else with more of a focus, which would relieve that pressure.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that Edinburgh can be like this because it's mostly university buildings that are empty for August, but presumably that's reflected all over the country. There are other cities that have the same sort of setup with empty buildings.
There was an attempt to set up a London Fringe a few years ago, which went absolutely nowhere. And I think the problem with that was that London is so dispersed. So Edinburgh is the only city I can immediately think of that has this amount of accessible space clustered together in a small area. Even the Old Town and the New Town is still a small area combined. So there is something unique about this, but then if you were trying to solve the problem, you wouldn't solve the problem by creating another thing just like the Edinburgh Fringe. That would just be doubling the problem, not solving it. So perhaps in due course we'll end up with something in March in Birmingham, which is the established trade show for a particular type of production. Who knows?
Or a shout out for the 2021 City of Culture Coventry, which is my hometown, and I will help to organise that. I mean, you've got the Camden Fringe that's running at the same time as Edinburgh now, so that's a sort of offshoot.
I think Camden Fringe is an interesting idea. I like the way it was originally described when they first created it was that you would have a huge audience in London who were aware this thing was going on in Edinburgh but didn't have an opportunity to take part in it. And would then, there's something going on in Camden, so we'll go to that instead. So for putting shows in front of an audience, I think is a brilliant idea. But every year I get stuff through from Camden Fringe saying, why don't you come and review here? Because we're busy.
There's something else going on.
Down to London and finding accommodation.
Yeah. The Vault Festival in London is probably the closest that there is. But it is an entirely curated festival. It's one organiser. So if that starts to expand out, it's at Waterloo, there is quite a lot of vacant space around there that you can see turning into pop-up venues, so perhaps that will start to expand out and become more open access. That would be an interesting thing.
One of the things is it's like throwing mud at a wall and see if it sticks, but it's really expensive mud.
Yeah.
If you're going to try it, you're going to lose money and it might not work, but it might. That's the thing.
It's like how many years will it take to actually, and also Edinburgh is the brand. There's a lot of mileage in saying we did the Edinburgh Festival run. There's not so much.
People don't even say Edinburgh Festival, Edinburgh Fringe, they say Edinburgh.
Yes.
It's just
I've been guilty of that.
Yes. People are like, "Oh, you're going up to Edinburgh this year?" I was like, "Well, I live here."
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You know.
I've had my hand slapped
We
on a
haven't-
couple of occasions to do that.
We haven't talked about Brighton at all, and I will literally get beaten up if I don't mention the Brighton.
Absolutely.
Because I spend a month every year down in Brighton for their 4-week long. You think Edinburgh's long?
Yeah.
The Brighton Fringe is 4 weeks long. I mean, again, there's a lot of potential there. It's a city that has a huge amount of creative activity all year round, and I think that they're struggling to quite figure out how they fit into the festival landscape. But again, that's something that we should all be supporting.
Yeah, I'd love to go to the Brighton Fringe.
Oh,
It's
do?
just a case of money at the time. So if anyone's watching wants to give me some money to go to the Brighton Fringe, please.
Yeah, it's a point of interest that maybe could the venues that are so, particularly the big four, could they be doing more outside of Edinburgh, like nationally? The Pleasance has a hub in London,
yeah.
which they use all year round.
Assembly has a close link with Riverside in London. Underbelly has the South Bank Festival, so it's only really the Gilded Balloon, which is the most Scottish of the
Yes.
of the big four.
And Brighton has its own sort of, not big four, but it has certain brands that are emerging.
Yeah, and Sweet is really emerging in Brighton, and Sweet, of course, do operate in Edinburgh and Dundee as well. So it's starting to happen, but actually, there's a little bit of me that doesn't like it.
Okay.
I mean, no disrespect whatever to Sweet. Sweet are great guys, but I wouldn't want to see. There was a year when Underbelly appeared at the Brighton Fringe, and I thought that's a shame. It's like every high street has the same shops in it.
Right.
Let's not go down that path. Let's keep everything distinctive.
Would that encourage? There's the argument about the franchise. It's all the same everywhere, so people can trust it, and kind of the infrastructure works elsewhere.
And there's also a benefit for the performers. So in the case of Sweet, who I really do think do it right, they have, some shows have a run in Brighton, and then they come up and have a run in Edinburgh. And it all kind of plugs together. So there's a good way of doing it, but there's also a very sort of bad lowest common denominator way of doing it. And I just fear that the lowest common denominator would win if it became the norm.
Would it help economic accessibility in any way, do you think?
If you didn't have to travel so far?
Yeah.
But,
I mean, an accommodation.
Accommodation.
Shout out to everyone, all of my homies that are paying London rent and Edinburgh rent this month, because that's the tough thing, because neither are cheap.
That's the thing. As soon as the festival comes to town, people put the prices up. Everyone wants to make a buck out of you.
But that's the problem, isn't it? It's supply and demand. That's the problem everywhere. Is there anything that could be done to regulate it? Or is that against free market economics and just cannot happen?
It's a bigger conversation, isn't it?
It's a huge cost. I mean, we don't have rent controls in this country.
No.
If we're going to introduce them, then it's not the Fringe that should drive that. It's something different. Yeah.
Why not? We'll start it right here. We'll start it right here.
Revolution.
Yes, absolutely. Start the revolution now. Looking forward to next year? Have you started thinking about it?
At the beginning of this Fringe, I was like, I really don't know if I can do this again, because it was quite a tough few first weeks. I guess now we've got to the end point and you're getting a bit nostalgic and you're like, wasn't it so bad? And actually, saw some really good work and there were some really cool people that approached me and stuff. Ask me again in May.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I'm still very much in the mindset this is like day 395 of last year's Fringe.
Like the first week seemed to drag. I remember emailing you and you're like, "Oh, this is day 100 of the Fringe or whatever," and it was.
It was a funny one this year.
Very strange.
And
very weird.
I think almost everybody felt it, that the first week was just a struggle, a horrible struggle. And then when I personally turned the corner around the end of week one, moving into week two.
Yeah.
But I will be honest. I mean, this live cast is all about being honest. So I will be honest. I cannot do it again the same way that I've done it this year. And I know what I'm going to do about that, but I'm not going to say now. So there you are. That's a teaser.
There's a thing about people who had their shows on after 10 o'clock. I saw a lot of them. There was one put the company on Twitter that tweeted, it's like, "Oh, we hear reviewers aren't coming because we're on too late." I think they're on like 11 o'clock or something. It's like, but every night there's elderly people in our audience, so why can't the reviewers make it? And it's just like, because maybe those elderly people didn't have 5-6 other shows to write about, and maybe they didn't have a 9 a.m. deadline, and maybe they didn't have young children to go home to, and maybe those elderly people were the fucking reviewers, you know, who are exhausted. And I just hated that kind of entitlement of, why can't you come? It's like, because you're on really late and I'm tired. I used to be able to do 5-6 shows a day, and I can't do that physically anymore. Maybe 2 or 3, I just can't.
They should be young and hungry, and the
Yes,
argument
that's
is
the thing
they are young
like,
and they are
Fringe
hungry.
is a 20-year-old's game now, and I'm, you know, 32 now, and I've got a small child of my own, and I'm just like, oh no, I don't know if I can keep up this pace.
It's getting a bit Lethal Weapon, this.
It is. It's like, I am getting too old for this shit. Like, stop it. Leave me alone.
What's your big takeaway? What are you going to be thinking about in a few weeks when you look back at it?
Well, working conditions, but also issues. I think if there was a theme that came out of the Fringe, it was race. We saw there was great shows about race, but also issues with race and racist things happening at venues. Somebody getting racially profiled at a venue, and racial incidents and things like that. So we like to think the Fringe is so open and it's so free. It's like, is it though?
Diversity is not great. I think I did see somebody had gone through the programme and picked out all of the shows featuring people of colour.
Yeah. And they've started Artists of Colour's meetups and things, which is great, but that shouldn't have been the artist's responsibility. The venue should have been doing these things. There needs to be more support, because the Fringe is very white. The Fringe is very middle class. When we talk about diversity, it's not just race, it is class, it's gender, it's all of it. And at the moment, it just seems to be white, male, comedian based, and that's not a true reflection of what it could be. But then what's stopping people coming up in the Fringe being more diverse? You know, we have to have those conversations.
I think the female representation, I think, has got a lot better.
Yeah, that's got a lot better. Yes.
You know, the Best Newcomer Comedy Award was a short list of 6, I think, of which 5 were women.
And who says women aren't funny?
They didn't win.
Hilarious.
They didn't win, but the short list was well represented.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Well, we'll all go for a sleep then, I guess.
Great.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you.
That is the post-mortem. That's it. That's done. That's it. Festival's done. Everyone go home. Have a wonderful year. We're going to be back here next year, and we're going to be here all year round, really. You can still get in touch with us. You can email us, and you can tweet us, and you can Facebook us, and we're going to continue to build this community throughout the year, because the application process for 2019 begins now, and we're going to be helping out as much as we can with that. Thank you very much for stopping by. We'll see you again next year.